Welcome, everyone. This is Kevin Petrie. I'm Vice President of Research here at Eckerson Group. I'm your host for today. We're really excited to be hosting this event. We designed CDO TechVents in order to compress the time that it takes data leaders such as you and your teams to evaluate emerging or fast evolving technologies and learn best practices for implementing them. This is our fifth, perhaps sixth CDO TechVent, and the topic is more timely than ever. It's next generation data catalogs, practices and products you need to know. So in terms of sponsors, we do want to recognize our sponsors who made all this happen. Data.World, Prometheum, and Think DataWorks are our vendor sponsors. We also have media partners who helped bring you to this event, and we appreciate their efforts. EM360, Solutions Review, Real-Time Insights, RT Insights, Datanami, and Bark. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Okay, so I'll conclude and then hand over to Wayne here by talking about Eckerson Group. We're hosting the event. We're a boutique research, consulting, and vendor advisory firm. We specialize and focus exclusively on data and analytics. You've probably read our research, and that's why you're here, but you may not know that our consulting division works with a lot of clients, big and small. You're going to see some household names here in terms of logos, brand names, not so brand names, and we're helping them develop data strategies, modernize data architectures, and build data governance programs, among other things. So please contact us if you'd like to learn more. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to our visionary, Wayne Eckerson, and our keynote speaker. Wayne's been a thought leader in the AI and the analytics field since the early 1990s. He's written 2 books, The Secrets of Analytical Leaders, Insights from Information Insiders, and Performance Dashboards, Measuring, Monitoring, and Managing Your Business, as well as many reports and hundreds of articles during 25 years in the field. So Wayne, over to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. You know, it's a great day, not only because it's the longest day of the year, my favorite day, summer solstice, but it's also because we get to talk about next generation data catalogs. And I'm fortunate to have with me David and Nitin, who are going to expound on this topic. So this keynote is actually 3 presentations in one. I'm going to start by giving a market overview of what's going on in the data catalog space, which has been a lot. It's been changing fast and furious. Then we're going to get the practitioner perspective from David and Nitin for 15 minutes. And then I'll come back and we'll talk about products and help you try to create a short list that makes sense, where you can compare apples to apples when you're going to evaluate and purchase a product. Or if you've already got one, to validate what you've got and make sure it's the right fit for your organization. So that's the agenda for the next 50 minutes or so. Let's dive in. I've noticed there's still some confusion out in the marketplace about the difference between a data dictionary and a data catalog. Well, very simply, a data dictionary is geared to technical users, and it contains technical metadata like schema, formats, types, definitions, whereas a data catalog generally is geared to business users, and it contains business metadata that business users can understand and want to look at. Descriptions of tables and columns, usage stats, sample data, annotations. Now, it is true that a data catalog could contain technical metadata, but I would caution you, if it does, you better make sure that your access controls are done properly so that your business users don't see that. Otherwise, they won't use the data catalog. It will feel otherworldly to them, and they'll be a little bit alienated and not adopt it. And as we'll talk about later, that's a big problem in the data catalog space, is adoption. Now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about this arc of how data catalogs in really just the last 8 years have evolved considerably, and the key innovations that have compelled that rise. So data catalogs essentially launched in 2015 when Elation launched its data catalog, and it was innovative. It automatically scanned your source systems and pulled out the metadata and presented it in a way that business users could absorb and interpret and get value from. And best of all, it was designed to help those individuals capture and document their tribal knowledge, which is all important when it goes to finding data that's useful for any kind of purpose, decision-making, governance, what have you. So these annotations, the usage statistics, the social cues like following and rating, all were things that were innovative at this point in time and really helped jumpstart this thing that we call data catalogs. But things have been moving fast, as I said, very quickly. Even those original catalogs were designed to support compliance and governance and self-service. The community of vendors have rapidly expanded these capabilities. So in 2017, we saw the addition or the enhancement of data catalogs to support a number of really interesting features like auto classification. So instead of just indexing your metadata, now some data catalogs will index your data as well. So it can identify instances where there's, say, sensitive information that you didn't know existed. Then you can tag that and deduplicate items that are duplicate in your environment, delete things that need to be deleted for compliance or other reasons, and then also automatically help you understand how your data sets that you're managing comply with external regulations like GDPR. In 2019 or so, we started to see the expansion of data catalogs to support data governance in a big way. One of the bigger additions was the addition of a business glossary, and that was introduced by Calibra. But very quickly, we saw the integration of data quality scores, the use of data catalogs to document and manage your policies for data quality, data governance, and other areas, and also built-in workflows and collaboration, because data governance is a team-based business. I mean, it's not just one person doing one thing. It really takes a team of individuals, data stewards and data owners, to make data governance happen. In 2021, we saw the expansion of data catalogs to support self-service. And the big innovation there was data virtualization. So it's one thing to be able to capture and peruse metadata. It's another thing to go out and actually access and query the data. And typically, if users are using the catalog for self-services purposes, that's what they want to do. And ideally, they don't want to go to a different tool to query the data. They love to just, when they find something that they know they need, they like to query it, access it, look at it right then and there. So a lot of data catalogs are now supporting that capability. Also, data lineage is really important for users who are looking at data to use for analysis purposes, to understand where it came from, how it was transformed, and also for application developers to understand if they make a change in this code, how is it going to impact applications that are downstream from it. So lineage has been a very important addition to the data catalog space. And then also people want to access and find more than just structured data in your internal systems. They want to find external data that's been purchased and stored internally. They want to access schema. They want to access queries. They want to access reports and dashboards. And all of those things are beginning to be added to data catalogs. Now, in 2023, most vendors are using machine learning and artificial intelligence to automate data governance operations by applying algorithms to the metadata. And this is called active metadata. It's being applied to all facets of data catalog operations, from compliance to governance to self-service. So we're using NLP to improve our search and discovery of information. We're using AI to fill in definitions in a business glossary, to identify errors or anomalies in our data, to improve our data quality. We're even starting to use large language models to automatically update or fill in field descriptions, column descriptions, table descriptions, among many other things. And all along, another big thing that's happened is that we've moved these catalogs from on-premises systems to cloud-based systems, even SaaS systems, as well as now multi-cloud systems, which is important in this day and age. So that's where we've been in the last 8 years. Time flies, right? But if I was to get my crystal ball out and prognosticate where things are going, one thing I would say in the next 2 to 3 years that we might see data catalogs spawn data marketplaces. And when you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. They've got all the metadata about all the core data in the organization, all the descriptions that you would need to productize data sets. It's not that big a leap to, in fact, turn the data catalog inside out and make it into a provisioning system for both internal and perhaps even external consumption. So the interesting thing is that 2 of our sponsors today started out as data marketplaces. That's Data.World and Think DataWorks. So I think they might be on the cusp of launching something there in the next couple of years. Informatica already does have an internal data marketplace. So that is a huge amount of innovation in a very short period of time. As a result, a data catalog now supports all kinds of different applications, and it's become very central to the way organizations manage their data, manage their applications, and indeed manage themselves as organizations. So I can kind of categorize these applications in 3 areas. One is defensive applications, security, privacy, data access controls, compliance management, lifecycle management. A catalog is proving invaluable here. Offensive applications like self-service, lineage, impact analysis, data sharing, cloud migration, all these things that help advance an organization to the next level. And then finally, curation applications, glossaries, policy management, operations management, data observability, all these things that we need to better manage our data so that it's trustworthy in the eyes of our users. So just for example, last year we had our data governance consultants create a framework for what their ideal data governance platform might be. And this is what they came up with. So the platform for managing data governance is in blue. Everything that is governed is in orange or green below. Now you see in here that the data catalog is simply one element in this data governance platform, along with decision rights, portal, search, business glossary, policy and compliance, issue management, governance, reporting, and operations and workflow. Well, what's happened is that the data catalog is subsuming all of those features and functions. So they're fulfilling most of the data governance requirements that organizations might have. And as a result, they're delivering much more value to the organization. The same is true with self-service analytics. I've used this diagram for a while to talk about the ideal self-service platform, which frankly hasn't existed. What you see in the middle here is the typical data analyst workflow. First, they have to discover the data, profile it, sample it, validate it, annotate it, make sure it's what they want. Then they have to go query it. Once they get the data, then they have to prepare it. And finally, once it's prepared, then they have to visualize and share it. Well, typically, you needed 4 different tools to do all these different things. Now we're starting to see some catalogs moving to support or fulfill many, if not all, of these capabilities. For instance, Prometheum is one that does all of these capabilities at this point, and Think DataWorks also is moving in this direction with data virtualization. And since they're here, I recommend that you talk to them. And also Data.World supports query capabilities as well. So all 3 of our sponsors today support I would call next generation data catalog that supports self-service. And certainly this is also true in data privacy and security. Any data catalogs, either on their own or through integrations or partnerships, are supporting the full raft of data security and data privacy capabilities. So I would think that we're at the dawning of a new era. Just like the age of Aquarius was the dawning of a new era of consciousness. I think we're at the new era. The past era has been the age of data. And that's taken a lot of time, energy, and effort to model data, extract it, build pipelines, store the data efficiently and effectively, and then query the data. That takes a lot of effort. But there's one thing missing here, and that is data management. We really haven't had much time or energy or tools, frankly, to manage the data that we're moving around and querying. So I think the next era, and many people join me in this sentiment, the next era is the age of metadata. Because if you can't manage your data, the most elegant architecture and the fastest query tools and the best visualization tools will not get you anywhere. And the way you manage your metadata today is really through a data catalog. So this really is the next generation of data catalog here. It's supporting all your data management capabilities and enabling you to govern them, as well as provide high degree of self-service analytics to users. Now, the reality is a little bit different from what I just presented. I believe in the potential and promise of data catalogs. Really are the new glue that's holding organizations' data together, if not the organizations themselves. But we haven't quite mastered the adoption and the implementation of them yet. So this is a chart based on some polls we've done on LinkedIn over the past 2 years. And you see that a very small percentage of organizations have fully deployed their data catalog. A little bit more than a third have partially deployed the catalog. And about 44% last year and 24% this year planning to deploy. So, fully deployed, that's a little depressing, to be honest with you. Given the potential here, I would think that there would be a lot more. But it's not easy, as we'll see, to do this. It's a little bit disturbing is the 22% who said they don't have plans to deploy a catalog. I think they might be missing the boat there, or maybe their budget they can't even entertain the idea of it. For those organizations that have deployed a data catalog, we asked to what degree of users adopted it. Again, the results are not great. About 10% have said adoption's been very high. 11% to 0% this year said high. About 15% have strong levels of adoption. About half say it's moderate, and about a little bit more than a third say it's fair or low. So that's a little bit discouraging. So we have to ask ourselves what's going on here. If this technology has so much potential, why is adoption slow to happen? So these are some of the challenges that we've uncovered. The first two are, I think, kind of related. If the data catalog is too complex for your business users to use, for instance, maybe you've got too much technical metadata in there, or it's not hidden from the business users, it's going to be a little overwhelming and not feel like it's an environment that they can benefit from. And that would cause a lack of user adoption. Lack of integration with other systems might be that the catalog doesn't support or connect to or scan metadata from their source systems. It may not have integration with like a BI tool that they use or another data catalog that they need to pull information in. And a host of other issues, missing functionality. Maybe you want it for data governance, but it's geared to self-service. Maybe you want to manage reports and dashboards or unstructured data in it and doesn't support that. Or maybe it doesn't give you access to the tool. So users have to do this two-step. Let's go find the metadata and explore it. And once we find it, then let's get into another tool and access it. So there's all kinds of issues. And on the other category, 22%. And I would say that maybe pricing is a big issue there because some of the enterprise catalogs are quite pricey. So there is an adoption conundrum, which we'll explore in our practitioner Q&A. So in my opinion, users will use a data catalog if the data is complete, the data is trustworthy, that means it's been curated, and it documents tribal knowledge, that all-important information that users normally get around the water cooler, but now we can add to a data catalog. But the catch-22 is users won't document tribal knowledge until they use it, right? So if you don't use it, there's no tribal knowledge in there. If there's no tribal knowledge in there, they won't use it. So we have a little bit of a problem. And the key is, how do we reach the tipping point where we get enough users using the catalog to document their tribal knowledge to get momentum for this very critical piece of infrastructure? Well, there's a number of best practices. You got to target, you got to focus. Start small and expand. And this is all motherhood and apple high for any technology implementation, to be honest. But pick your application. Do you want to do privacy? If so, just pick a few key data elements you want to manage. If it's governance, pick a data set or a database to manage and govern at start. Or if it's self-service, pick a small group of power users who have one or two data sources that they need to explore and discover on a regular basis. So understand the requirements, kind of as I just mentioned, before you start, before you dive in, so you can limit your scope and learn from there. Once you've got your scope, then make sure you do have governance in place. This is a great way to kickstart a governance process. Most importantly, define who can access what you're doing and the data and metadata that you're providing access to. Curate the data set and certify data sets so that users know exactly what's trustworthy and what's not. And then finally, implement and augment. Provide some incentives for folks by gamifying things. Perhaps use a leaderboard like we're using here today to give people incentive for accessing and updating the data catalog. And then from your initial use case, learn what went right, what went wrong, adapt, and then do it again for another use case. So with that, I'd like to bring in David and Nitin, and we're going to drill down on some of these issues that we just talked about, explore challenges and best practices. So welcome, guys. Okay, so first, David, good friend, had more than 20 years of experience as a consultant for large consulting firms, such as Deloitte and Grant Thornton, where he led many data intelligence projects in a variety of industries. He also is an adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Austin, where he teaches graduate students about information systems. And he's also the owner of Code Ninjas, an after-school program that teaches software coding to kids, which is wonderful. Nitin Singhal has served as a technology and product leader at various brand name companies such as Visa, PayPal, and JP Morgan. And he recently helped Twitter launch its data management and privacy infrastructure, including the data catalog and data observability tools. He is currently VP of engineering at SnapLogic. So let me start with you, Nitin. You've implemented data catalogs at 3 large brand name companies, PayPal, Visa, and Twitter. What were the primary challenges you faced in those implementations, and how did they differ?
Thanks, Wayne, and that's a great question. Looking at last 20 years, having implemented such things across different companies, and in last 20 years, as you were showing that slide about the age of data and age of metadata, things evolve over a period of time. So from PayPal, that was in 2006, the problem was how do we mitigate the cost surge that was coming on storage system, to Twitter, where our challenge was how to mitigate the compliance risk. And the biggest challenge across all of this, which is very common, is what is the definition of complete? How do I know that my catalog is complete and it is correct? So, and again, right, you bank on tribal knowledge, you look at the smartest person in the room, or you make some gut feeling assessment that, hey, it looks like complete. But, across every single thing, what I had to do is I had to bank on reconciliation of information. And we had to tie many catalogs to the procurement system to see that are we accounting for every single byte of data to make sure that the catalog is complete. Otherwise, you think that the catalog is complete on day one, and within 2 days, it is out of state, out of date. And again, right, finding the methods to reconcile is the most important thing. And having that sense of data that tells you that, hey, what does that completeness mean? And is it really complete or not?
Interesting. So David, you helped Nitin develop a data catalog at Twitter. So what would you say are the keys to success for implementing a data catalog?
Yeah, Wayne. So based on the experience at Twitter, but also at some other companies, major companies like Dell, T-Mobile, and others, and the big banks, first and foremost is to have a clear use case. use cases rather that encompass a broad representation of user personas. Too many of the data catalog projects are run by IT for IT or by the technical data stewards and doesn't take into account the non-technical users. So here's an idea, like let a business leader be the executive sponsor and owner of the data catalog. Don't let IT or risk leader. At Twitter, interestingly, the initiative to develop the data management office and catalog was initiated because of risk and compliance reasons, GDPR, etc. But then in the end, it's the product leader that becomes the owner. At Dell, it's the same thing. It's a chief customer officer who ended up owning data catalog after it kind of circulates around different IT and data technical leaders. We also need a robust data literacy and just ongoing stewardship training program to encourage adoption, as you mentioned. Our data catalog fits the enterprise use out of the box. It needs to be continuously tailored. There needs to be user experience experts and data integrations expert that continuously improve that data catalog ecosystem. And finally, metadata is data. It's kind of ironic. A lot of times we initiate data catalogs so that we can help organizations manage data as an asset. But the data catalog team itself or the data governance team itself is not resourced, is not equipped or staffed to manage the metadata as a full enterprise grade data asset, right? And so we have a lot of stories of how the metadata from the catalog cannot integrate with the systems catalog in CMDB systems or with the security metadata, etc. So you definitely need to treat that metadata as its own, almost like a data mart or even metadata lake.
Yeah, I like that. You got to treat metadata as data, which means that one reason probably why a data catalog is so hard to implement is that you're creating a whole second program for managing data. It just happens to be metadata.
Yes.
And it's not easy. So you actually have two programs, a data program and a metadata program. That's what we see in a lot of our consulting engagements. We're helping companies get over that first hill of data management at the same time, wrapping the metadata and the data governance around that so it's successful. So Nitin, back to you. If you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently when implementing a data catalog at any of the companies you worked at?
No, absolutely. I think, one of my learning is if I parachute into a company and start saying that, hey, we have to implement and enforce data governance practice, there's always perception about data governance that it is a bureaucratic process and we are doing it for some regulatory purpose. And that regulatory purpose is not very appealing to many engineering folks across the organization. That means that you have a goal to achieve, but you do not have hands to execute on that goals because it is not compelling for that audience. And that creates a lot of friction. And, essentially what ends up happening is somebody high up in the ladder, sends a top-down message that, hey, we have to make it happen. That is not the best state to be in to be able to enforce it. So if I have to do it again, right, I will definitely use facts. I'll try to drive action using facts, identifying Hall of Fame and Hall of Shame metrics that is common across different audience. People can challenge the process, but people cannot challenge the facts. And that is what I felt was very helpful as I implemented things in Twitter. I had to, in fact, reframe the data governance to auditing process. So I call that, hey, we are building an auditing system. That auditing system surfaced all the key metrics, repository, governance, and facts, saying that, okay, you're talking about this data, but this data is not used for a while. So why we cannot purge it? Or there is an IT application that I know is used for wrong purpose, and why it is so. So when we say that, hey, implement the right access control, that is a very open-ended statement. But if I give them and show the facts that, hey, you're using it for this purpose, if this metrics gets exposed to media or leaked, there is a serious repercussions in terms of brand reputation and also regulatory penalties. So once you tie those repercussions, what is going to happen if we do not do that and support those actions using facts and have a very good handle on the auditing system that you incorporate, the chances are that you will get the traction and respect that you warrant as you implement and navigate that process.
Excellent. David, back to you. You've got a lot of expertise in data privacy and cybersecurity. Is a data catalog an absolute requirement these days for ensuring data privacy and managing cybersecurity?
Yes, Wayne. So I think my personal opinion is it is becoming so, right? Under the NIST cybersecurity framework, asset management is actually considered one of the strategic pillar of a successful cybersecurity program. That includes data discovery systems, API catalogs. These are considered foundational, but unfortunately, they're often among the least mature capability in many of the company's scorecards whenever they assess their cybersecurity program. So you can still get by without a data catalog, but if your company wants to implement advanced capability such as zero trust security, attribute-based access control, DevSecOps, or if they just simply want to be accelerating the AI and data product lifecycle without breaking security, they absolutely need to have the capability of a data catalog. That's probably the reason why many of the cybersecurity and privacy and risk technology vendors lately have been building their own data discovery modules. One in particular, some in particular, even build their own customer matching module, which is very interesting. On the other hand, from the data management vendor landscape, there's a couple of acquisitions, Databricks, Informatica. They've acquired data access management firms, Okera, Professora. Microsoft has announced that they're integrating Purview as a built-in governance and security capability into their data fabric. So there's a lot of development where the integration between the catalog and the security and privacy capabilities are becoming more integral to the product itself.
Great. Thanks for that insight. Now, the purpose of the CDO TechVent is to help data leaders and their teams make better purchasing decisions. So what advice can you give them about how to evaluate data catalogs? What would be the most important thing that they should look at from your opinion? And this is for both of you. Keep your responses short. That would be helpful.
Sounds good. I can start, and David, you take it over. So I think in last 10 years or so, I was definitely in a position where I had to do a lot of evaluation for third-party solutions and think about, what can help us accelerate our journey. And at times, we just felt that, hey, there is a magic bullet in those third-party solutions that can solve my problems on day one. So I think my advice will be define the problem statement very well and what goals you have from the catalogs. It could be engineering velocity, it could be data discovery, it could be regulatory issues, or it could be just operational efficiency. And then when you look at a third-party solution, be very clear about what you want to achieve from those tools. Some of those tools are fantastic, right? They can be great accelerator and catalyst, but still the ball is in your court. They still bank on your own knowledge, your own data for them to be successful. If sometimes we bring in those third-party solutions and do not give them enough support in terms of engineering, and those tools fail. Please note that they bring in workflow assessment like Colibra, or they bring auditing capabilities like Alessian or many other tools. They're fantastic for what they do, but they still depend upon your knowledge and your data to be successful. And I would say define the expectation very well. It is not magic that some third-party solution will come and it will magically solve everything on day one. Have a right expectation from them, and do make sure that you support them to be successful, and then basically have a way to measure it. The final thing will be, have a metrics in place to assess good, bad, complete, and incomplete. And that is on you. That is not on anybody else. Once you define it, you can evaluate it, and you can make things and tools very countable.
Great, and thank you. Now, Dave, you get the last word.
Okay. No, I think I agree with everything that Nitin has said and you have said earlier, and maybe just not much to add, but this is a hot market. It's always going to mushroom data catalog products and capabilities. So I definitely would recommend that leaders choose a tool that can work across various types of data sources, that can integrate well with other tools such as the marketplace, the machine learning ops, the data pipeline, security and privacy tools. if in a complex organization it is possible that there will be multiple data catalogs or multiple metadata repositories or mini catalogs of some sorts. And so it's very important to choose a tool that can integrate well, that has an open interface. I definitely would look into the product roadmap to make sure that there is a future expansion or integration with capabilities in areas such as security and privacy that I discussed for. Like major vendors are already going that direction. I think everybody will head that direction. Especially lately, there's been a lot, with AI coming to the consciousness of the general public. There's going to be more and more data sharing. And the White House Office of Science and Technology Policies have recently issued a national strategy for what they call privacy preserving data sharing and analytics, PPDSA. Sorry for the long acronym. Don't know who chose that. But essentially, they're trying to promote standards for this class of tech, capabilities like homomorphic encryption, differential privacy, synthetic data. These are, if you want to deploy this at scale, you're definitely going to need a catalog capability. So I project that a lot of data catalog and these capabilities are going to integrate more, especially in the light of the encouragement of the Office of the President. And finally, I would choose a tool that have good UI and UX. And if the tool does not have great out-of-the-box UI, make sure that it's easy to build custom UI on top of it. Make sure they got good API libraries that are well supported and documented so that your front end, as well as your integration engineers, can work seamlessly.
Oh, terrific, David. Well, thank you both for your insights. That was tremendous. Product framework. So that was a great segue, and David, into product technology and what you should look for. So I said that is the point of the CDO TechVent, to compact the time it takes you out there in the audience to find, evaluate, and select products in specific emerging technology categories. So for data catalogs, Eckerson Group has created this worksheet, which we use internally to evaluate products. This has 45 categories of criteria and about 180 criteria altogether. So it's a little overwhelming, but it covers the company and the products and their perspectives on the market and their competitors. So I'm not going to go through all 180 criteria, but I've bubbled up to the top a couple of things that I think are really important to look at. Build on what David and Nitin said. One, I think, is company heritage. It really is important to find out where the company started. Why did it start the company? Why did it create this product? What problem was it trying to solve? What pain point was it trying to address? And it's important to know that because, as they say, the apple never falls far from the tree. Even though the vendor will continue to innovate and add functionality and features and support different use cases, its strength is its heritage. Its strength is where it started, and that's what you should find out, because that's really what you want to align to. It's also important to understand who its target customers are. Who's it really targeting? And by this, I mean, when a salesperson gets a lead, what kind of lead gets them really excited? Is it a company without any IT or very little IT that doesn't have the time or expertise to implement a data catalog? In which case, maybe if you've got an easy to deploy tool with an easy GUI for users to use, that's a perfect customer for them. Or maybe it's a large company that's now starting to adhere to external regulations like GDPR. It needs to understand where instances of customers and sensitive information lie anywhere in its data ecosystem. So how do you get your arms around that? So maybe that's the target customer for the company. So understanding who they're targeting and whether you line up to it, I think, is really important. Architecture is really important. Was it designed for on-premises, or was it a cloud native product? Does it support SaaS, or does it allow you to host in the cloud, or platform as a service? How does it scan source systems, and what kind of things does it scan, right? These are all really important to understand. Pricing is a big differentiator, although it's really hard to get your arms around what vendors are going to charge you until you get to the very end of the negotiation process. But this is a big difference between, say, mid-market products and enterprise products. You can tell by how they're pricing whether they consider themselves one or the other. And also how they price and how easy it is for consumers to wrap their mind around it and things like that. And of course, the old standby, trusty standbys, customer references. You learn a ton by talking to other customers who have used the tool, and as well as consultants who've used multiple tools, and they can tell you very quickly strengths and weaknesses of the product. Every product has strengths and every product has shortfalls, and you just have to understand whether those line up with what you're looking for or not. So to help you create a short list, I created this little quadrant chart. Now, unlike a Gartner quadrant chart, there is no best quadrant to be in here. The purpose is to find categories of tools that best line up with your interest. Obviously, there's many dimensions you could cut this on, but I've chosen two. Scope, is the product designed for mid-market or departmental orientations and users? Or is it more enterprise to support entire mid-size or large organization? On the bottom is go-to-market. Is the product what we would call a pure play data catalog? That's all the vendor offers is a data catalog. So it specializes in that market. Or does it offer something else, some kind of a platform, like a data platform, a data virtualization platform, even a data governance platform, to which it added a data catalog after the fact to facilitate access and discovery. Then on the right here, you see further dimensions. General purpose is that the catalog pretty much supports the three applications underneath it: self-service, data governance, and compliance. Or does it have a special focus on one or the other? Most catalogs support all of the features of these applications to one degree or another, but some really emphasize one of these application areas. And if that's of most interest to you, then those are the products you should look at. So in these upper right-hand quadrant, these are the big vendor product platforms, data platforms, typically, maybe BI platforms that have now added a data catalog to facilitate access to data that's in their platform. So if you've got one of these platforms, you might entertain using their catalog if that spans the majority of the data that your business users use. Or maybe it's a more specialized platform focused on data governance or data virtualization, and they have added a data catalog to facilitate discovery and access to information through those platforms. On the pure play side, these would be the more established pure play data catalogs that have grown up over time and have added all the features and functionality that we've talked about, or they are a specialist that has a lot of maturity in what they've delivered over the years. This last quadrant probably is the most innovative quadrant. These are a lot of startup companies with new and innovative features, oftentimes affordable, quick to deploy, with a really nice GUI, or a specialist product. All right, so let's look at what this looks like when we put products in here. So as you can imagine, these are all the big boys and girls, I guess we should say. Most of them data platforms, Tableau being more focused on BI and self-service. This platform is a mix of data virtualization vendors like Starburst and Denodo, Alteryx, which is a data integration and analytics platform, and then Atacama and OvalEdge, which started out as data quality suites or data governance suites, respectively, and have added data catalogs. Now, they could probably, I'm sure if these vendors were here, they would all say that they're more enterprise than mid-market. If they've been around for a while, they probably have as many enterprise customers as mid-market companies, but I thought this was a fair assessment at this point. For the pure plays, these are some of the brand name vendors out there that have been around for a number of years. BigID and OneTrust tend to focus on compliance. Atlan and Calibra more on governance. Data.world and Alation more general purpose. And then the mid-market is surprisingly crowded. This is only a small portion of the vendors in this space. Prometheum and Think DataWorks are here today, as well as Data.World. Prometheum very much focused on self-service, and Think DataWorks focused on external data as well as internal data. So since they're here, I think you should take a look at them. In fact, that's what this slide says. Check out Data.World. It was the first cloud-native, SaaS-based enterprise data catalog that uses graph technology to enhance discovery, lineage, and governance. Prometheum is a really interesting tool. It's got a rich data catalog heritage, and it decided to focus exclusively on self-service and combine a data catalog, or at least data discovery portion of a data catalog, with data prep, visualization, and publishing, amplified with AI. And then Think DataWorks started out as a kind of a catalog for open data, and it now excels at indexing both internal and external data and provides direct access to data via data virtualization and ETL pipelines. So I would recommend that you visit their innovation hub and attend their breakout sessions in a little bit. And representatives from each of these three will be on our vendor panel in about 5 minutes. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to turn this back to Kevin.
Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for the most energetic part of our event, where we have three experts discuss how to evaluate and select next generation data catalog tools. So please submit your questions and we'll try to incorporate them during the discussion. Wayne, over to you as panel moderator.
Great. So the first data catalog, as I mentioned, was shipped in about 2015, so almost a decade ago. And since then, data catalogs have become the de facto glue for metadata and a must-have product for every organization that takes data management seriously. But as we've seen, a lot has changed in the past 8 years. Today's data catalogs are very different than their predecessors. So here with me to explore those changes and help you make good product decisions or validate the products you've purchased are three distinguished panelists. Brian Jacob, CTO and founder of Data.World, Louis Wynne-Jones, VP of Product at Think DataWorks, and Casey Lai, CEO of Prometheum. Their companies have each reimagined what a data catalog is and what it should do. So we're really glad to have these three vendors of all the data catalog vendors out there with us today. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Let's start with Brian here. So Brian, historically, data catalogs ran on-premises and cataloged on-premises data. Is it safe to say that today a data catalog should run natively in the cloud?
Yeah, I think so. I think, at this point, cloud-based SaaS is really the best way to kind of just deliver at the pace of innovation that you need to in this rapidly changing market. You can't shrink wrap and deliver a piece of software once or twice or maybe 3 or 4 times a year at the most and really keep up with the pace of how things are changing. Also, anyone with any kind of substantial data estate that you're trying to catalog is hybrid. You are hybrid. You're going to be hybrid. Maybe you're very modern and you're completely in the cloud. That's great. Then obviously your catalog should be there. But if you're in any kind of state of transition from on-prem to a more modern world, you're going to be hybrid. And so you want to have your catalog deployed in the cloud. You obviously need to be able to have connectors and tendrils that can reach into that on-prem data estate that's going to exist for some period of time and connect to it. But you really want the core of that technology that can innovate quickly to be cloud-based SaaS.
Yeah, and I should also ask, kind of as a corollary, you were one of the first vendors to implement a data catalog on graph technology. Is that also a requirement these days?
I mean, at the end of the day, cataloging is about collecting metadata, about enriching metadata. Metadata is fundamentally a graph, right? Whether you implement it on a graph database or not, it is a graph. Logically, you ultimately, and when you do implement it on top of a graph database, you really then you're able to then unlock the true potential of the metadata because you can now treat it as a graph. Its graph nature is a first-class citizen, and you can enrich, something you talked about in your keynote. you really want to differentiate the physical metadata, the structure of what things exist that are part of your data state, from the business metadata, where I would also call maybe the logical metadata. And thinking about that metadata as a graph lets you kind of naturally make that transition from you do have to, it is important to know what databases exist and what tables and columns and things like that exist in them. That's all really important information. But what you really want to do is derive the logical business level metadata from that about what the data are actually about. And so we think building it on top of graph technology is a really important thing, because it lets you treat the data really closest to its true nature.
Yeah, so it really helps in the discovery phase.
Yeah.
Louis, to you, historically, a data catalog indexed just really structured data from core systems. Today, what kinds of things should a data catalog realistically index besides the structured data?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point and a good question. You said in your keynote, we're in the age of metadata, right? And metadata is a much wider umbrella than structured data. And I think that the other point is that sort of the internal systems that originally data catalogs supported were really like the legacy systems that IT teams were using. And data is much more diffuse now throughout the enterprise. And as people are shifting both migrating to the cloud and then migrating back, which is what we're seeing now, you're creating more and more sort of data sources, which makes creating a source of truth for all of that data, or at least an observation layer for all that data, more complex. So really the way that we think of a data catalog is it's not just sort of the core systems and the legacy ERPs and all that stuff. It's everything that's being generated on a daily basis, being virtualized up into the catalog to enable that discoverability and use by everyone. And that's sort of the critical component that I think you were sort of talking a lot about. And I think that the other panelists and I agree on, which is that it's not just for IT systems, it's for business users as well.
So would that include reports and dashboards, schema, ML models? Would you include those things? And even unstructured stuff like videos and audio?
I do, and I think that the thing that we want to bear in mind is a data catalog is not a document management system, but it can also include that non-structured data under its umbrella. I think that with structured data, you have a host of things that you want to be mindful of: the health of the data over time, how the schema changes, how that's going to impact downstream models, and you can get all that sort of thing through lineage. But I think that it's also critically important for a data catalog to be able to manage the metadata of non-tabular data, of video files and things like that, just more than anything, so that you do have the central source of truth and then can connect it to models and trace the lineage and sort of graph it through its life cycle.
Excellent. All right, Casey, how is AI changing what data catalogs can do? That's a big question.
Yeah, my gosh, how much time do you have? No, I think we've seen kind of like two shifts recently with AI. One is obviously, I think with natural language, it's becoming, I think OpenAI was the first app that got like 100 million users in the first month. I mean, if you were a product manager, you want to study kind of like which product has the best UX, I think, that's a metric that said it won. And so I think, that's where, I think we definitely saw that natural language is something that is very conducive to data discovery, right? Which is a core tenet of data catalog. And so I think having the ability to support natural language search, natural language processing is super important. And so catalogs have to start adopting that way. I think we talked a lot in the chat about how do you get business people on board. Catalogs tend to be more IT-centric projects. You talk a lot about complex UIs. I see these all as symptoms, right? Like the root cause is like business users, they are more familiar with sort of an interactive approach to data discovery, right? So I think that's where AI has definitely made a change to data catalogs by introducing NLP search. The other aspect where I think data catalogs have changed because of AI, using generative AI to kind of do a lot of the grunt work, as I like to call it, the stuff that nobody really enjoys doing, but everyone knows we all have that one customer who complained that they spent 3 months annotating or tagging something, like, way too much time doing that. And that's where you can use generative AI to actually automate a lot of these tasks, right? May not be 100% right out of the box, but if it did it for you in 5 minutes, it's not the worst thing in the world either, right? And so this is where I think it actually has changed the way that we think about curation, the way we think about annotation, which obviously goes hand in hand with data catalogs. So I think those two areas have actually made a big impact in kind of the discovery as well as the annotation layer. And then the third layer where AI has actually helped is actually in the reasoning, the logic, right? In terms of being able to figure out, well, if I have multiple tables and multiple columns, the same name, which one do I pick? I think that's where, you know, we've done the legwork, right, of profiling, of crowdsourcing, et cetera, in the catalogs in the previous generation. And now with AIs, they can do that, build on that foundation and do that at scale much faster and be able to just return the results and return the suggestions for you. So I think all that actually can really lend to a far better experience, right, than traditional data catalogs have been. So we're super excited that the age of AI has definitely come and is, you know, is here to stay and is going to change data catalogs forever going forward.
Right. Now, you've been using AI from the get-go, even before ChatGPT came to fore, right?
Yes.
For natural language search. Are you going to use LLM for that, or more for like filling out descriptions and column names?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So, you know, for anyone who's played around with LLMs last 3 months, I think, yeah, like everyone would say like it's super impressive, it's super fast, but I think anyone who is really deep into data will also notice that it may not be accurate, it may not be consistent all the time. I see Brian smiling there. And that's where I think, you know, it's actually a nice pairing, right? So, you know, when we first, you know, applied LLMs, we're like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then by the third time, like, why did I get 2 different answers for the same question that I asked within 5 minutes? That's kind of odd, right? What we realized was that for complex tasks where you're going to translate a question into a query, LLMs aren't quite there yet. They can do some basic suggestions of syntaxes, but again, it doesn't have a catalog, so it's not going to know the exact table name, the exact column name, and it's not going to know like the fully qualified names or which is the better one to pick. And that's where I think the, you know, like something like Prometheum actually does a better job at relevancy, right? If I could sum it up, relevancy and accuracy. But again, going back to what I said earlier, the grunt work, like, hey, if I have this, you know, weird SAP table with like, you know, 85 esoteric SAP column names, right? That's where I can click a button and generative AI can actually automatically tell you, right? This is what MATNR means. This is what MAKT means. That's really useful, right? That's the type of stuff that I think you can apply generative AI in, and we do to really kind of kickstart that process. And, you know, going back to discussions in the chat earlier, I think those are some of the things that make it easy for a business user, right? To be able to just see and go, okay, now I understand the data. I'm not intimidated. But if you want accuracy and relevancy within your domain, I think that's where, you know, you still need, you know, a domain-specific catalog, right? Which is what people implement in their environment, right? Plus their knowledge and their history of, you know, what to pick, how to pick, and how to assemble. And AI can help with some of the syntax suggestions. I don't think generative AI is fully there yet for some of the complex tasks, like answering sophisticated queries through natural language. Thankfully, that keeps us in business for a while.
Brian and Lewis, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when I was nodding when Casey was talking, you know, just back to your comment previously around metadata is king. You know, ultimately, you know, large language models, generative AI, it's not a system for storing factual information. It deceptively seems like it is, right? You can go ask ChatGPT lots of questions. You can get lots of factually accurate questions, but responses to those. But really, what it's doing 100% of the time is statistically predicting the next set of words. And so it'll, you know, we talk about hallucinations, but that's really just statistically the next likely word is this answer that I'll give you just as confidently as a real fact. And so, you know, really, you know, doubling down a lot of what KC said, I think the way to think about it is these technologies are really complementary. And you know, training generative AI, at least current generation generative AI, there are some things that could change some of the dimensions. This is changing super quickly, but training it on data and using that as a way to retrieve facts is a terrible way to abuse the technology. Training it on metadata to teach it how to go consult structured, governed sources of information is actually really where you get true business value and real business applications out of generative AI. So you need a data catalog. You need to really strongly understand your metadata to effectively use LLMs to achieve real business goals.
Louis, I'll give you the last word on generative AI if you want it.
It's great to be in a panel with a bunch of people who agree about this, because often you'll talk to people and people will just say, yeah, AI is going to solve all of our problems. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's not a panacea, and I think that it is as good as the data that is training it, and the data that is training it is often horrendously flawed, which is why management comes before AI in the sort of scope of the hierarchy of needs. So I think that it's really, really exciting. I think that there's a lot there, but I remember 10 years ago when we were talking about AI solving everyone's problems, and it didn't do it then. So I think that people are treating it with a healthy regard and knowing what goes into making it work well. And there's a few companies, I think Promethean is one of them, that's really treating it the right way. I think that too many people are slapping it as a sticker on what they do and not necessarily focused on the actual nuts and bolts of what will make it successful.
Wait, Wayne, before we go, just one thing. I think we forgot to mention security. Right, security is super important when you talk about generative AI, especially about LLMs. You've heard about the Samsung developers uploading their code right into OpenAI. Right? This is one of the things that I think is actually pretty cool about data catalogs. Is it's much safer to just give metadata, right, to OpenAI, to LLMs, as opposed to giving data. And so I think that's actually where there is actually a huge advantage in having data catalogs, in that you don't violate any security risk, because you don't have to actually send physical data, right, to your LLMs. But by giving the right metadata and leveraging parts of the capability of generative AI, you can actually still derive the right answers. That, I think, is not only an edge in accuracy and relevancy on discovery, but it's a big win for the security folks as well.
Let's go back to the adoption question from the keynote. And Brian, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think companies have trouble getting adoption for their data catalogs?
I think one of the biggest hurdles to adoption is something you really focused on in the keynote. So I'm going to kind of double down on that, just the technical versus business users, and really kind of understanding both those personas. I think, how we think about it is, I think it's really important. You actually have to serve both those personas, right? You do absolutely have to have an experience that's focused on the end business user, gets them directly to things based on business understanding, logical understanding, true kind of getting me to value without having to know the nuts and bolts details. That's incredibly important. But you also have to have a focus on the experience of the technical folks, because despite the fact that we're going to increasingly use LLMs and generative AI and AI of all sorts help us automate more of those tasks, those technical folks still are the ones who are actually providing a lot of leverage to the rest of those users. They have to be able to get in the platform and participate in the process of governing, curating, understanding, improving that data. So I think the hardest part of adoption is getting that mix exactly right, realizing that you're not just serving one persona, and so you can't just have a one size fits all
Right.
people approach the platform and use it.
So when you say technical folks, Brian, are you talking about data stewards or IT folks?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because that further subdivides there, right? You have folks like data stewards and governance teams more broadly, who are maybe not technical in the sense of digging in and writing SQL, but are absolutely thinking about nuts and bolts, fine grained, structured metadata that's subject to compliance regimes and all the kind of the complicated details of governing that data. And then you do have the folks like the IT folks, the DBAs, the engineers, the product managers, things who are folks who are getting involved with the data at that level. You can roughly break it into business users who don't want to deal with any of that, and the more technical group who are dealing with those things. We actually do further kind of subdivide the personas into really, how do we think about, how does the IT team who's setting up the automated metadata collectors and connecting to all the various systems and bringing their knowledge into the system work with it? How do governance teams who are actually participating in ongoing governance as a part of their daily activity, and then how do the end users who are really just there to get max value out of the system, how do each of those groups want to come to and approach the system, and the way they see it when they hit that front door needs to be different, needs to actually respect the fact that what they're coming there to do are very different use cases.
So should support a lot of personas, which means you have to have good access control, right?
Yep.
And role-based management.
Yes.
Good. So see, you're a clever guy. Do you have any tricks for getting people to adopt the data catalog?
Tricks. Yeah. I mean, look, I think I'll answer this by kind of dovetailing off of what Brian was talking about earlier. I think one of the challenges to adoption, right, which kind of dovetailed into the tricks for helping that, is integration, right, with other tools, right? I think a lot of customers get frustrated when they first deploy a catalog. They think it's going to magically do everything, and then they realize, oh wait, all I can do is search metadata, or oh wait, I still need a human to manually enter all the curation to actually find it useful. I think that's like the first part. What we see is usually like that's where like the first time the air kind of gets let out of the balloon, and you lose some steam in the adoption. And what happens is the user stops coming back the next time, right? We hear this a lot with, like my previous life, my previous company, which is a pure data catalog company. I hear this from other customers with pure data catalogs is, you bought 1,400 licenses and only 14 people are actually going to use it. And all the 14 of them have the title data stewards, right? And that's where I think, it's not to be, it's a thing to be not to be taken too lightly. The integration is really important, because when people discover, they don't want to just read about the metadata. Sure, that's helpful. That's the first part, right? But the next thing they want to do is, well, how quickly can I see? How quickly can I see what the data looks like? How quickly can I see that? And so some of the tricks that we've come up with is give the users as much of a warm start as much as possible. So for example, even going to the point of like when you've looked for something, quickly suggesting, by the way, here are the other questions that you can also answer that's similar to what you just asked. That makes it kind of interesting for some users, kind of go, oh, it's kind of like a search. We search for something like, did you mean this? Or what about this? Or other users have searched for this. It kind of helps the user, kind of gets them more curious to further explore, and then they stay in the catalog longer, right? That's one. The next thing we found is ultimately for business users, they're very visual people, right? As much as they like searching for things, like, they want to see charts, they want to see pictures and graphics. And so if, you can quickly generate a visualization of what that data, what that question they're looking for, and instantly show it to them in a matter of seconds, that keeps the engagement going much longer. It may not need to be like the final output, but it lets them know that they're on the right path, right? Or not, they need to search for something else, right? And so these are some of the things that we found is that, if you can reduce the wait time for that user to have to go wait for someone else, to have to go in and out of a different tool, compress that wait time and give them kind of, little nuggets that getting them further along the journey of completion, it actually really goes a long way, right? And it's one of the things that we've also learned, maybe not as a trick, but just as a painful lesson learned, is that nobody wants to start out with a blank sheet of paper, right? Meaning like you can catalog everything. Hey, I have all the table names, columns, every table. But like a lot of times business users get intimidated, like, why? I don't know what to ask. I'm not really sure where to get started. And so these prompts and these hints of, hey, based on what we have, based on what your role, here's something that's interesting you might want to look at, right? And this is where the AI comes in. That's really powerful. It's automatically suggesting relevant things that people want to look for and search for. So those are some of the tricks that we found that kind of gives that first gentle nudge, and then keeps the user much more engaged, right? Because if people aren't engaged, if they don't explore, if they don't tag, if they don't annotate, if they don't do the crowdsourcing, interactions, then the catalog kind of doesn't go too far, right?
Yeah, those are great. Now, I thought you were going to say, Casey, data virtualization. You were one of the first catalogs to offer that, right?
Yeah.
And it so happens, as I mentioned earlier, that we have the 3 vendors sponsoring this event who have all launched data virtualization capabilities. So, Louis, I want to ask you, isn't that a trick to get user adoption? And how are you leveraging data virtualization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks for the setup there. I think that what data virtualization obviously offers is you're not just sort of able to find the thing, but then use it at the end of the day. And the analogy I always end up using, and it's a little dated, is sort of if I went to a library and was able to access the Dewey Decimal cards, but not get the book out, that sort of limits my functionality and the use of the actual institution, right? And I think that you mentioned right off the top in your keynote, difference between data dictionaries and data catalogs. And we've always just said that data should exist within the catalog. Now, the problem with that is, of course, you then need to consider governance as core and role-based access controls as core. But both what Casey and Brian have been talking about is sort of, if you know the persona types who are going to benefit from your catalog, from data producers to data managers to data consumers, you can cater the tool to each of those different types, right? And I think that when it comes to adoption, which is the question that you're kind of asking here, is you need to know that each of those different types of people are going to want a different thing at the end of the day. And for a data producer, they might need to know where your API docs are and then go and figure it out for themselves. For a business user or someone who wants to consume the data, they're going to need to be shown the art of the possible. And I think that that's where you need to do some education. Your UI needs to be immaculate because it needs to be an app that they want to log into every day. And it needs to provide them with suggestions, recommendations, quality controls that they know that the data they're using they can trust. All that stuff that just sort of gives people pause before they want to start adopting new technology, that should all be erased, both through the sort of functionality and the interface of the tool itself. I think what you said, Casey, was sort of giving them a warm start and really providing different pathways for the different groups who are coming into the catalog. Obviously, they all need to be sort of spoken for when you are giving them access to the technology. It needs to be robust enough as a tech tool to have the APIs so that they can still use it the way that they're used to using a metadata management tool. But then for the more consumers, they need to have it be very sort of familiar and intuitive so that they can get out of it as much as they want. And I think that the secret sauce for us is not just the documentation being, immaculate, not just that the UI needs to be really intuitive, but also like the human touch of just going and talking to people and finding out what their problems are and sitting on campus with them and taking them out to lunch and talking to them. That's the business adoption that I think that a lot of people aren't focusing on, because traditionally these things have been so much more focused on that IT user persona who maybe doesn't need to be sort of have that chat about what are your goals, what are your strategic priorities, what are your digital transformation strategy over the next 10 years, because that's really the thing that we're hoping to unlock.
That's really interesting. The human touch is still very important, even in the world of digital data catalogs. So, Brian, I want to ask you a question before we go to the rapid fire rounds.
Sure.
Do you want to add any tips for getting people started or talk about your query capabilities?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned virtualization, and like you said, that's something that we think is really important, has been built in kind of from the foundation of the company. A lot of times we have to kind of understand the use case, right? A lot of folks are really still at the point of their journey where they want to focus on metadata, and that's okay. You need to be able to have a fully functioning catalog that is purely metadata. But to get into kind of any of the deeper use cases, and really, certainly as we're moving into more of an AI powered world, to really be able to use your catalog well in an AI world, you need to be able to virtualize through, use that metadata as a roadmap to understand what data exists, what does it actually mean, and how can I get to it. But when you think about tricks for getting people to adopt the catalog, our adoption methodology is really, we think of it, we talk about a lot being like a T-shaped approach, right? Do you go breadth first or depth first? Well, it's a little bit of both, right? We go in like, well, what are your obviously most important data assets that are going to have the broadest approach? Your data warehouses, key SaaS systems, key BI tools, right? Those are the things that were like the obvious, 4 or 5 things that are going to have the broadest appeal. And then from there we zero in, okay, now let's go to one specific use case. What is one business question that you can't answer today? What's one business problem that would be, of massive value to you to solve? And let's drill deep on that. And that's going to leverage that kind of initial breadth of, look, my catalog is populated with lots of things. It's populated with whatever my starting point of my business glossary, my taxonomy, whatever logical assets I have. But now I'm going to drive through and say, now what else do we need to bring into this catalog to solve this one use case? And what you find then is that if you start stacking, like the long tail of those use cases that stack up, each get easier and easier and easier until the point where it's like now you have a truly fully discoverable data catalog where each new use case is just completely self-serviceable because you've built it on the foundation of connecting up data sources in their kind of priority order as they and linking them together and connecting them in a way that was actually used to solve real world use cases.
Okay, great. Are you guys ready for the rapid fire round?
Let's do it.
All right. So, and I'm not going to call on anyone. So just jump in if you have an answer. Keep your answers short, 30 seconds. First question, what will be the biggest change in the data catalog market in the next 18 to 24 months?
It's got to be data virtualization, I think. I mean, you're talking to 3 companies that all do it already, but I think that everyone who doesn't is going to find themselves falling way behind. And before Casey can jump in and say it, I think generative AI is going to be a big one too, especially for some of that business metadata.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I like to say data access, right? I think data virtualization is a type of data access, but I think it's people are going to be looking for an incorporation of both metadata and data access to have a true, end-to-end discovery experience. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. And then the generative AI is definitely going to complete the journey, right? Where that chatbot experience. So instead of looking for data or retrieving for data, it's really retrieving answers. So I think that's going to be the big, profound change in that it's going to get us a completeness of the workflow for data catalogs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, double down again on what they both just said. Maybe, I think the way I refine it a little bit is like if you look to my breakout session, like the theme of my breakout session is really, 2 phases of how AI are shaping data catalog. Phase 1 is going to be how can we use AI to do better cataloging and governance. Phase 2 is going to be how cataloged and governed data is going to help us do better AI, and it really just relates to everything Lewis and Casey just said, which is that right now I think we're in a phase of using these tools to improve our tools, to improve our platforms, and that's really useful and it's immediately reachable today. But what comes just on the other end of it, which requires virtualization and a solid catalog, is how do I actually use the fact that I understand my data, I've managed my data, I've appropriately connected up my data with a roadmap that really understands what it means to be able to build real AI powered solutions using generative AI.
Excellent. So in the audience, please come up with questions if you haven't already, because we're going to take them after this next rapid fire round. Okay. Kevin, maybe you can queue up some questions from the audience. But last rapid fire question for all of you, and jump right in again. What is the single biggest differentiator of your product? Because obviously we want people to go into your innovation hub, go to your breakout sessions, learn more about your product. So this is kind of a way to tee up those activities later on in the event. So who wants to jump in first?
I'll go. It's really the end-to-end experience. You literally ask a question, natural language, and we'll go all the way through from discovery of data, assembling the data, the query, and the visualization, and then the whole answer, right? Literally in a matter of minutes, because we think that's the most naturally intuitive way business users want to interact. So I feel like you get a complete experience, and then being able to integrate with all the different tools and BI tools as well. So users don't have to leave Prometheum to be able to stay inside and be able to iterate and fine tune their answers. I think that end-to-end experience is our biggest differentiation.
I can jump in. You kind of set it up front when you introduced me, Wayne. I'll go back to that. Our knowledge graph architecture, ultimately, we don't think of data catalog as a means to an end. Data catalog is a tool to bring together everything that is known about data. What you really want to do is then connect that up live to the data itself and turn that into something that both humans and AI can interact with very naturally, based on an understanding. All the aims that Casey just outlined are where everyone's trying to get to. And I think we think our biggest differentiator is the fact that from the core of the technology, from the beginning of the company, we're really building out a semantic knowledge graph, and the data catalog is a step along that journey that everyone has to take.
Yeah, I think that those are great, and we're going to be breaking down in a lot of our sort of features and the way that they differentiate themselves in our breakout session. And I highly recommend everyone join it. But I actually want to go back to something Wayne said in his keynote about company heritage, and maybe take a bit of a different spin at this answer, which is that our company built a data catalog because we needed a data catalog when we started building and distributing data products about 10 years ago. And when you live inside that muck, when you know exactly what it's like to have these complex data pipelines and issues of data health and how to disseminate it and do so securely and do it in a sort of role-based access control way, I think that term dog fooding comes up a lot. You know, we've lived this experience, and because we've lived it, we've now been able to create a software that can help other people sort of follow in that path. And I think that experience and that history is one of our greatest assets.
Terrific. Well, thanks for all that. Very brief synopsis of your own products. I rarely do you get vendors talk for just 30 seconds. But I think, less is more. So let's turn to the audience questions. Kevin, what do you have for us?
Okay, great. We've had some great dialogues here. I think, it's interesting because, Wayne, this reinforced a lot of your questions. There was a fair amount of commentary about the need for business usability, the need to appeal to business users. And I think that you did touch on that a fair amount. There's a perspective here from Priya Sarathi, and I can read it. I think advanced data scientists need to be able to access the data catalogs, and they're providing requirements for data management teams. So I wanted to just invite perspective on the role of data scientists in all this. We talked about AI as a transformative element of how you manage data. There's also data science and AI consuming what's in catalogs, and would invite perspective on that and the role of data scientists.
Yeah, I've always seen them as just another persona, right? Data analysts, data engineers, data stewards, business analysts that can benefit because if you think about what most data scientists do, they build models, right? And if they can't get to the right data or the accurate data to build their models, then guess what? The model's going to get delayed. The model's not going to retrieve accurate data. And so I've always been a big champion of that, and definitely encourage customers we talk to always get their data scientist team involved. It is a norm, though. I will say that a lot of times they sort of get left out of the traditional thinking, and so most people just kind of think, "Hey, just give them their notebooks and they'll be fine." And again, it's like, well, sure, but like you're now expecting this poor guy or gal to like know which data sets are good, where to go find them, but so I think organizationally that probably needs to start changing. But yes, I definitely agree that big fan that data scientists definitely should also have the same access to data catalogs.
I think can I jump in as well?
Sure.
I'm going to, so it doesn't matter. I think that one of the things that we've sort of noticed in the past 10 years is that data scientists have often been used as sort of the problem when it comes to a data catalog statement. I think that's completely unfair. They've been sort of said, 80% of a data scientist's time is spent, doing whatever. And I don't think that that's fair. Data scientists have inherited a lot of complex tech and are really, really good at their jobs and also know the tools that they want to work with. I think you get into trouble when it comes to the adoption angle for data scientists because they know exactly what they need to do and their problems are not the same as a data analyst. And I think that when we conflate all those persona types, we start to have issues with adoption. Because with a data scientist, you can't go into a data scientist and say, don't use your pandas data frame. Don't use the things that you've been learning to use for a long time. Just make their lives slightly easier. You don't need to completely upend their stack. I think that a data catalog is especially impactful for people who really don't have any access to data and need to sort of break through. I wouldn't say put data scientists in that group. So the worst thing you can do is try to upend or make their lives more difficult.
One real quick note, it's mostly kind of reinforcing some of what Casey and Lewis just said. I think one of the areas we see a lot when we talk with data science teams about how the catalog helps them, going back to that 80% of their time spent just doing cleaning and kind of data janitorial work. How I look at that is that's often the work that data scientists do end up doing that they'd really rather not do. And that's where, the catalog often provides the most value to a data science team by basically offloading work that they'd rather not do. And, the data scientists tend to be working in their workbooks, in their data frames, they end up doing a lot of point data curation, and they're usually, they're data people. They're actually quite good at it. They often don't see the value of a catalog. It's like, why do I need all this? I'll just go look at the database schema and I'll figure out what it means, and I'll frame up my frames, and I'll go do my work. And the problem is that knowledge is now siloed into that workbook, and it helped them solve that problem, but no one else benefits from that. So where we try to get data science teams involved is to say, look, you're doing a lot of data curation every day. If you do it over here in the catalog, then other people can actually pick up where you left off and use the knowledge about what that data means and how it can be used. And you don't have to go hold their hand as the person who, when somebody else comes along and says, how could I go use this data? Oh, go ask Bob. He figured it out for this other project. So I think I mostly agree with a lot of what Louis said, but when we try to engage, data science teams, that's really the angle that we take with them is, let's capture your knowledge and make it reusable by other people so that you don't have to redo that work 100 times, so you can focus on real data science.
That's a great point. It's all about tribal knowledge, and data scientists have more of it than anybody else.
Yeah, great stuff. So we've got a couple questions here about generative AI, the hot topic of the year. How will generative AI suggested curation, like a description for a business term, be efficient if it has to be reviewed or approved by the owner of a given domain? Great question. Casey, I loved your perspective on getting domain specific. I think that's the future of language models, because to really solve hard problems, you need to train on curated domain specific inputs. But to this specific question, do you have thoughts on that? You obviously need a human in the loop on some of these things.
Well, I think you should have a human in the loop, right? Because like Wayne said, like there's still always going to be tribal knowledge, and it's never just domain or vertical specific. It's always company specific, and sometimes even organizational specific, I've found. And so while generative AI can be pretty good at automatically generating that, I don't think it's a bad thing to say that you still want a human being to just check and make sure that, yes, this is 100% accurate and relevant for us. But I think the key is, if you just look at the scale and the speed at which generative AI can do it versus a human, it's not even close, right? And having generative say, go pound through these 50,000 columns and give me the human definitions, and great, I'll see you in 3 minutes, and it's done. There's no way a human being can do that, right? So it gives you that quick warm start to begin with, which it's always a lot easier to edit something that's already been done than to start, right? So I think that's where I think it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing that generative AI can automate this, give you some place to start off with, give you something to search for, give you something to consume, and then have the human curated over time to make it better.
Yeah, it's really important to think about, like, that approval isn't necessarily binary, right? It's not, here I generate all these things, now I have to approve them. It really comes down to what's it being used for, right? 50,000 automatically generated descriptions, even if a lot of them are wrong, still greatly enhances the use case of help me understand what's in this catalog and search for it better. But I need to know when I'm landed on a particular page, hey, this was generated by an AI and was not verified by a human. So if you're going to use this to report to the SEC, you might want to check twice before you end up in hot water. Being transparent about where it came from and how much curation has gone on is what's really important.
Great point.
That makes sense. It's okay. So another one here related to generative AI. Would natural language search capability replace generative AI-based natural language search capability replace technical search and discovery, or would it be complementary within the data catalog?
Okay, so this is the last question. We only have 2 minutes left. So
all right, thank you. We'll make it a speed round question.
I think it's totally complementary. I think it comes down to how the user is interacting with the catalog, right? If the user wants to just purely search for technical metadata, the catalog should fully support that, and the user should be able to do that. If the user wants to phrase it in the form of a question, great, then they can actually do that with NLP.
Awesome. Okay. An answer for anyone else, or should we wrap up?
10 seconds. Totally agree. I mean, you look at my breakout session, I'm going to talk about some of the things we're doing with natural language search, and I think the synergy is really obvious. You use the natural language to tap into the faceting and the kind of structural understanding of the data that already exists. These two things go back and forth. It's not either or.
Yeah, I think it needs to be flexible. You need to be able to provide people with the ability to search technical, structural, administrative, and descriptive metadata, as well as any sort of natural language version.
Fantastic. Okay. So thanks, folks. Really good discussion. I know I learned some things, and I can tell that folks in the audience did and were very engaged. So now is your chance to attend smaller breakout sessions presented by each of our panelists. So if you want to engage on that, you can access any or all sessions by clicking on the View Schedule button in the corner of your screen. All right. Thank you, folks. I hope you've all gotten some good insights out of the breakout sessions and vendor interactions. Wayne and I are going to walk through takeaways from the event. I feel I've learned a fair amount, and hopefully you have as well. Okay. So Wayne, why don't I hand over to you and we can start talking about what we've learned today.
Yeah, well, I was going to turn it to you to give us the first takeaways, since you were listening and I was doing most of the speaking. Is there anything that caught your attention today?
Definitely, and we encourage chat from the audience here. I liked how you characterized, and I thought that you set the table well with the age of metadata, because a lot of the commentary centered on the value of not just metadata, but active metadata, and the need to present it to business users in an engaging format. I thought during the panel discussion with Nitin and David, there were some interesting trends in terms of understanding how can you get a complete view of all your data and maintain that view so that you can get sort of a live interactive capability looking at your data sets. David,
Hold on. Before you go too much further, let's talk about some of these things.
Yeah.
The age of metadata that's a testament to digging a little bit deeper, because I already had this presentation finished yesterday, and this morning I was kind of lying around in bed and just thinking about the presentation and how can I really drill home what's going on here? What are the major changes that are happening in our industry, not just with data catalogs, but what changes are data catalogs facilitating? And it struck me from the work that some of our research analysts have done, like Dave Wells and Sean Hewitt and Jay Piccionary, that metadata really is the big trend here. And catalogs are kind of just the mechanism that we're using to manage that metadata. So I think this descriptor of age of metadata, which only came to me early this morning, is a good one. So I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you pulled that out of that. It's funny with Nitin, I didn't understand what he meant by complete view of data until talked on a bit. And I think he started talking about reconciliation and validation and making sure the business people take a look at what's been in the catalog to ensure that it's actually correct. So obviously, I think the point there was that you need to curate what you're cataloging, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a continuous process, and it involves people and process. I think it echoes some sentiments probably from Nitin and David that there's no magic silver bullet. We all know that. We've been in technology long enough, but it's always worth remembering and reminding ourselves to spend equal time on people and process so that you can curate.
That was Nitin, right? Initially?
I believe it was, yeah. Yep.
And David reinforced that. Who said take someone out to lunch? I think that was in the vendor panel, that it's really important.
Yeah, I think that was Lewis.
Yeah, take people. It's you can't replace that water cooler. So if you're going to have a catalog that works for business people, you really have to go understand how they're using it by talking to them. Yeah.
So Wayne, on the note of metadata, we've actually got a great comment here from Robert Seiner. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the need for metadata governance? Wayne, you made the point that when you have a catalog, you if you're going to get serious about metadata, you introduce a whole set of data management processes, metadata governance being one of them. And we are working on a report with Sean Hewitt about exactly that topic. But if you have any quick thoughts as part of the takeaways here, that'd be great.
Yeah, in our consulting work, data governance is just always a huge component. There's so many things that need to be governed. Usually data quality is the big pain point that companies are feeling, which is why they want to start doing data governance. But once you start doing data governance, you realize oh, I've got to manage the metadata so I can manage the data quality and, the data access control and the data privacy. So yeah, this is kind of a meta layer, right? Where you need a program to manage a program to manage a program. Bob, you probably would appreciate that because he's deep in that, I know. But yes, metadata management and a catalog, I believe, is the tool to facilitate that kind of work. But maybe Bob can chime in here on that one if he's got other thoughts and opinions. I don't know. Can we actually get him on the line here? Is that possible? I don't know.
I don't know. I guess we'll defer to Julie on that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, another big theme throughout the discussion, and I'm sure came up in various breakouts as well, is the need for business engagement and the need to ensure that, as David put it, this is not a catalog managed by IT for IT. Start with a business problem statement, as Nitin was saying, and stick with that. Stick with solving that business problem, and then do a lot of the things that we heard on the vendor side about creating. I think an immaculate UI was Lewis's comment to help guide business users so that they can really consume and increase adoption. Because there is that persistent challenge that you talked about, where plans for catalogs are, if anything, getting postponed compared to a year ago, probably because of the economy, which is unfortunate.
All right, let's unpack some of those things.
Yeah.
So can't just focus on T. Boy, that was really interesting, Kevin, because when you and I first reviewed my slides, we thought about taking that first slide out on data dictionary versus data catalog, and I took it out and then I put it back in. I think this morning actually, and that was the slide I think that was referred to most by people about. Not that you shouldn't have IT people in the catalog, they play a role, but they're a persona. And if you want the data catalog to really work, you'd have to personify it, right? You have to make sure there are views, distinct views for each persona that you're trying to support for the use cases you're deploying it for, right? I'm going to make up a word here.
Personify.
Personify. That is a word.
It is a word. It's a new meaning of an old word.
I'll give myself credit for that.
Hallmark of good research. We'll coin new terms.
Yeah, the immaculate UI. Well, that's a good way of terming it. I think certainly for certain types of business users, the executive, the manager, and even the data analyst to some degree, they need a clean, easy to use graphical user interface. I think we could all use that. And that's really going to help adoption and deployment. But the GUI has to be tailored to each persona as well, so that you're not showing technical metadata, for instance, to the executive, as I mentioned in my keynote. So
yeah,
I like the term immaculate GUI, because it's the complete opposite. You have to really think hard about what you're going to show people, or else it's not going to work, right? So, all right, this catalog's getting postponed. Yeah, did you say postponed or?
Yeah, that was my word. But I was thinking of the chart you showed that had the delta between 2022 and 2023 about no plans for catalogs, and the no plans went up, which surprised me.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge sample. I'll give you that. And I think we can only speculate why that is. I think I said maybe they don't have the budget for it, and they might be looking at catalogs out of their budget, which is one reason why I think having this slew of mid-market oriented vendors with much more aggressive pricing is going to be a real boon to the industry.
Yeah, and this is a classic case of you can save money now, penny wise, pound foolish. You can save money now, but I think the longer term efficiency benefits of catalog we all agree on, and I think folks on the call here would as well. So it's a solid investment.
Yeah, but I think those mid-market vendors that I mentioned, like ThinkDataWorks, like Prometheum, I think they saw early on that some of the challenges with the initial group of data catalog vendors is that they're too expensive, too hard to deploy, long to deploy, and a little bit more technical than they should be, at least some of them. So they've come in with these new tools that are lightweight, very affordable, really, we'll call it immaculate GUIs, right? User interface, and really fast to deploy. Now, they may not have all the bells and whistles of the established vendors, but they'll get you, 60 to 80% of the way there. and then either you bank on them continuing to innovate, or like I know some catalogs like Prometheum, you just integrate with your enterprise catalog and bring in its metadata into the other environment. So that integration is really important.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And another mega trend is AI, especially generative AI, and ways in which large language models can assist, guide, append, document assets in the catalog. And I thought there was some good discussion there, and agree with, I think, Brian's point. LLMs aren't architected to store factual information, which is precisely true. They're performing an exercise in statistics to spit out syllables and words based on what works well together. It looks magical, and it's very helpful, but you better check it. So there is the need for the human in the loop. And that certainly fits with research I'm doing right now on the data engineering side about language models and where they help and the risks they introduce.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what someone said. They're good for metadata, but not for data, right? I think Casey said that.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That's from a security perspective.
Yes,
right?
that's true for security. But overall quality risks abound, quality, intellectual property handling, bias, and so forth.
Yeah. So what would you say was the sense of the group about what LLMs are good for? It seemed to me things like automatically, creating descriptions and field headings.
Yeah, automatically drafting things, descriptions, and we've seen it from other vendors as well, helping with discovery, but then helping describe what's been discovered, provided the human who's an expert can vet it. But the other big trend, which we'll see a lot more of, and again, this echoes research I'm doing a layer below with data engineering and pipelines, is getting domain specific. So if you can have a language model that's responding to detailed domain specific data, ideally internal enterprise data, it's going to be more accurate.
These are your hopefully soon to be famous small language models, right?
Yeah, small language models. That's the blog we have out today.
That's from Kevin, right? So these are domain specific, where you're training it on specific sets of metadata or data. I mean, GPT, I think doesn't. I mean, you got to give it text right now, right? Yeah. So you train on domain specific text and jargon, and it's going to give you a lot better results, right?
Yep.
More accurate.
If you go small and specific in a governed setting, you have higher confidence in what comes out. And also you can solve harder, more complex problems.
I want to thank everyone for participating, and I hope you got some value out of this. We'd love to hear your opinions, how we can make this better. And Kevin, I'll give you the last word.
Wayne, thanks very much. I really enjoyed learning from you on this, and great to see the engagement from folks in the chat area and from our panelists as well. So thanks, everyone.